It's a very stressful job, isn't it, John?
I'll tell you, Mo, the jurors watching you and trying to make judgments about you, the adversary trying to upset what you're trying to do, the judge sort of making rulings on the fly, and you have to adjust all the time in real time to the rulings the judge makes, and the client who's sitting there, with his hands folded, just, waiting for you to get the right result. And the first question to Elon was, you're Elon Musk. The world cares what you say. We didn't know what he was going to say. There was pause, and he said, well.
So what made you decide, let me take my talents or services to Saudi Arabia? Any worry that the tech could one day replace all the thousands of hours it takes to become a law graduate and eventually practice law, will that be robotized, if that's a word?
There's some significant issues there, Mo.
At an altitude of 37,000 feet, we soar, with a rich legacy of honoring our guests and a unique style that has resonated with the world for 78 years. We carry the name of our country on every journey and across every sky. We are Saudi. We welcome you in our own way. We shape our present and build our future. Saudia, our name and country, our style and approach, striving for excellence in everything we do. This is how we fly.
All right. Thank you so much for flying into Jeddah. I'd like to think it was for me, but even if it's not, that's fine as well.
I would fly in for you, Mohammed.
You are very sweet. Thank you, John. One of my favorite movies of all time is John Q. So
John Q,
the one with Denzel Washington, when he had to hijack a hospital because they wouldn't operate on his son who needed a heart transplant. And when Sada Afedi introduced me to you, and then I saw your name, I was like, the moment I meet him, I'm going to ask him if I can call him John Q on the episode.
I'll answer to that.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Thank you.
I've been called a lot of different things.
Oh God,
not thin skin.
I'm going to go with John Q and nothing else outside of your name. Just to introduce Mr. John B. Quinn. He's an American lawyer and one of the founding partners at Quinn, Emanuel. I'm not going to be able to pronounce
Urquhart is a Scottish name.
Urquhart.
And Sullivan.
Quinn, Emanuel, Urquhart, and Sullivan, LLP. In 2011, John was listed as one of America's most influential lawyers by the National Law Journal. 2016, a poll by Bloomberg Big Law Business, readers voted Quinn the country's most famous practicing lawyer at a top U.S. firm. John attended Claremont McKenna College and Harvard Law School. Very impressive. Where he was the editor of the Harvard Law Review and a Knox Fellow. He graduated in 1976 and joined the law firm of Kravitz, Swain & Moore in New York City. I'm very intimidated by everything that I just said.
Shouldn't be.
Harvard Law, been practicing since 1976.
They crank out 500 lawyers a year, Mo.
Oh,
there's a lot of us.
That's still a very small number. I've never had a lawyer. I don't think I had a lawyer on the show until now, and certainly not
this
one.
This is the first?
First, certainly one of your magnitude. So I need to really watch my words carefully.
I'm honored.
More than I ever have before. Thank you again so much for coming for this.
Pleasure.
I really feel like I'm going to benefit from it on a personal level, and I hope the audience do as well. And just to fire off or start the conversation, I never put any time to Google, but from the movies I watch and the shows that I watch, I hear litigator, I hear attorney, I hear lawyer. Do they all do the same thing, or is each different in its own right?
In the English or in the American usage, lawyer and attorney are kind of used interchangeably. A litigator describes a particular type of lawyer. A litigator is someone who deals with disputes, which is lawsuits. That's what we do. So arbitration, disputes in court, problems with the government. Other lawyers are generally referred to often as transactional lawyers. So if you need to raise capital and you need to float an issuance on the market, or you want to do an M&A transaction, you'll get lawyers to document that. Those are sort of transactional lawyers. And the world is kind of in big law firms globally. The world is mostly divided between transactional lawyers and litigators, but they all answer to attorneys or lawyers.
And what on earth is a barrister?
I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
It's a British term, right?
It is a British. So the Brits have a different, and this is true in other Commonwealth heritage countries like Australia, Singapore, there's a lot of them, where the law practice and litigation world is divided between solicitors and barristers. And barristers are the litigators who actually go to court and argue the case to the court. They show up in court. That's their specialty. They're great oral advocates, and they specialize in that, and they're trained to do that. Where solicitors are the litigators who seemingly do everything else. They prepare the case. They work hand in hand with the barristers to prepare the case and to try the case. Some solicitors get what they call rights of audience. I've learned this term from dealing with UK lawyers, so they can go to court as well and they can argue. But this is a division of the practice which is unknown in the U.S. And I'm still learning what the different roles are of barristers and solicitors.
That is something. Have you ever had to deal with a jury and that whole environment of trying to convince 12 people that
Sure. That's enshrined in the 7th Amendment to the United States Constitution. That 18th century document, trial by jury is preserved. And so the question is, what cases are heard by juries? And all criminal cases are heard by juries. But everything else, if it was triable to a jury under English law in the 18th century, we still present those cases to juries, no matter how complex it is. So like patent disputes, patent litigation, the most complicated technology cases in the U.S., they are tried to juries. So that presents some obvious challenges. So we inherited the system from the British. It's enshrined in the Constitution. The British have basically abolished jury trials in everything except for criminal cases. That's still the voice of the community. They're going to decide whether somebody has infringed the social norms and whether they should be punished as criminals. And I think also defamation cases, kind of unusually, because they involve reputation. And so maybe the voice of the jury isn't considered important there. But the Brits don't use juries for anything else. It's only us. We still have juries.
So two questions. Who decides whether something goes to jury or to have the judge decide? Second question is, doesn't a jury diminish the power of a judge?
Interesting question. Basically the default position, as I said, in the Constitution, there's a right to a jury trial, period. Now, the parties can agree to waive a jury trial. If you and I enter into a contract, we can have a provision in that contract that says in the event of a dispute between us, it's going to be decided by a court, or for that matter, an arbitrator. We'll do it outside the judicial system. We'll hire a third-party arbitrator to decide it. So parties can, by contract, can agree to waive a jury. You can waive a jury before trial, even if you don't have it in the contract. But the default position is the cases are going to be tried to juries. Does the presence of a jury diminish the power of the judge? Basically, in a trial where you have a jury, the judge decides what the law is and makes rulings on the evidence as it comes in during the course of the trial. I'm sure you've seen lots of movies where there are trials, and there'll be an objection, the hearsay or whatever, to the testimony that's coming in. The judge rules on those. We'd say that's like in baseball. He's calling balls and strikes. He's controlling the courtroom. That's the role of the judge. And at the end of the trial, he will instruct the jury on what the law is. Like, this is a claim for breach of contract. The elements of a claim for breach of contract, there must be an offer, there must be an acceptance, there must be consideration, there must be a breach. He will tell the jurors this is what the law is, and that the plaintiff has the burden of proof. And it's up to you, the jurors, to decide whether or not that case has been proven by a so-called preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard than the criminal standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. Preponderance of the evidence just means the scale tips at all, like 50+%. So, and then it's left to the jury to decide, having been instructed on the law, it's up to the jury to decide whether the burden has been met or not. And they return a verdict. There's been a breach of contract, yes or no. If there has been a breach of contract, has there been damage? What are the amounts of the damages? And they return that verdict. So it's kind of an interesting relationship. The judge controls the proceedings, controls the law. That's the judge's province. But the ultimate decision maker is the jury.
Do they vote at the end of it, or do they collectively come up with? Just excuse the novice question.
No, it's absolutely fine. Have you seen the famous Henry Fonda movie? What is it? 12? I forget what it's called.
Angry Men?
No, I'm blanking on the name of the movie. It's embarrassing that I can't remember it. But it's about what happens in the jury room. I mean, it's dramatized, obviously. They're instructed on the law. Then the jurors are told to go into a room, the jury room, and confer and deliberate and discuss amongst themselves the evidence. And, in my experiences, these people who have, because of their automobile license numbers or their voter records or their address, they've been pulled out of their ordinary lives and told you must show up for jury duty. You have to go, you have to do it. They don't want to be there day one, but if they get selected to be on the jury, you start to see they take it extremely seriously. Like the second day, they'll show up and they'll dress better. You'll see it. They're taking it super seriously. In my experience is the jurors want to get to the right result. And so they will deliberate. The deliberations are secret. They can't have any communication with anyone. It's not necessarily, we did a case recently where the jury was out, for Elon Musk. We can talk about that case. The jury was out for just like 2 hours and came back with a verdict. Sometimes it'll take a few days. And they come back and they deliberate until they reach a result.
What if not everyone in the group agrees with the narrative that they want to go back with?
They're given a verdict form, and there isn't really a narrative. They're basically checking boxes.
So it's not a voting system.
It is a voting. They have to reach agreement, and it's different. Like in some jurisdictions, it has to be unanimous. In federal court, it has to be unanimous. We have two systems, a federal court system and then a state court system. There's 50 states. They each have their own systems, a little bit different rules. In California, it takes only 9. So if you get 9 votes, that's the verdict. There can be 3 dissenters, okay? Most of the time, and in criminal cases, it has to be unanimous. And basically, they need to be in there and discuss this until they reach an agreement. Sometimes they're just absolutely, they can't get past it. They can't reach an agreement, and they'll tell the judge, they'll send a message out. The judge will have them come in the jury box, and they'll tell them, we're just at loggerheads. We can't reach an agreement. The system at that point has a lot invested in concluding this trial. You don't want to have a do-over. If the jury can't reach an agreement, you're facing starting all over again and doing a new trial. And that's a huge cost to the system. The case has monopolized the courtroom and the judge and the court's resources for the time of that trial. So the judge will give them kind of a stern admonishment, like you shouldn't unreasonably hold to your views. You should certainly make sure to listen to the other jurors. You should do your very best effort to reach an agreement. Sometimes they can't. It's kind of rare, but sometimes they can't. And then it's called a mistrial, and there's a right to start all over again.
It's a very stressful job, isn't it, John?
I'll tell you, Mo. In some ways, law practice, in some ways, it's a dumb business in the sense that in our country, we're mostly bringing people with legal talent together with people with legal problems and charging by the hour for our time.
It's a profitable venture for sure.
Can be, it depends. But that's sort of the general outlines of the business. Compare that to high-tech businesses and so many other businesses where you're making huge investments that can go out years into the future before you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Those are really, really complex businesses. But as simple as the business is, as I just described it, I think trying a case to a jury is one of the most difficult things a human being can do. This is all happening in real time. You have jurors in the jury box who have nothing better to do than watch everything that you're doing, scrutinize everything that you're doing, and they're making judgments. They're trying to figure out who is telling them the truth. They suspect that one of the lawyers is not being truthful, and they're trying to figure out which one it is. You have an adversary whose sole job all the time is to make you look bad, to object to the questions that you've asked, to try to keep out the evidence that you want to get in. You have a judge up there on a dais who's calling balls and strikes. Now, he's a human being, so not always consistently. He can interrupt you. You go in with a plan, and the next thing you know, your plan is turned upside down because of something that's happened, because of some ruling. You have to go to plan B or plan C. And then you have a client whose life, whose property, whose business is all on the line. I mean, they've engaged you to handle one of the most important matters they have going on in their life. And it's all live action. This is all happening at once. The jurors watching you and trying to make judgments about you. The adversary trying to upset what you're trying to do. The judge sort of making rulings on the fly, and you have to adjust all the time in real time to the rulings the judge makes. And the client is sitting there, with his hands folded, just, waiting for you to get the right result.
Can I throw a fifth in?
Sure.
The stand, a witness.
The witness, absolutely. The witness, you have somebody up there who you are trying to extract information from. There's kind of arcane rules about the kinds of questions you can ask and how you can form the questions. And the witness you can't tell the witness what to say, obviously. So in real time, you've got to extract this information from the witness in using questions and formulating questions which, if it's your witness, they can't be so-called leading questions. It's, suggest the answer. And the witness is going to be super nervous. The witness has to perform too. Try to tell their story or what they know the best way they know how to do it. And they're nervous.
Under oath.
Oh, yeah, and it's under oath. So there's all these moving pieces, and it is extremely difficult.
Sleepless nights, I'm sure.
You got to sleep. That's the other thing. Because these things go on day after day. So yeah, it's stressful, but you better sleep because you got to get up and do it again the next day.
And be sharp. Sharper than the guy you're going against.
Yeah.
Is there a case that, from all the cases that you've done, forgive the broad question, is there one that stayed with you until today, one that you really remember more than any others for whatever reason that you can recall?
Well, one is the first case I ever tried to a jury. I had never done it. I had never seen it done.
Okay.
I was a very young lawyer, and I was scared beyond belief.
Is this around 1976?
No. It was much later. And I actually started out as a transactional lawyer. So it wasn't a few years into my career where I realized I wasn't cut out to do that. I was really cut out to do what I do now. But my first jury trial was just kind of a super scary, intimidating experience. And it was a 3-month trial in San Diego. And I learned so much in the course of it. And somehow, miraculously, we ended up winning that case. But I can tell you everything about that case. It was an employment case. It wasn't huge stakes necessarily. It was a discrimination case, race discrimination. The two plaintiffs, there were two of them. They were both African Americans. They were both older people. They had lost their jobs. They alleged that the employment action, the termination, was as a result of their race and their age. And I represented the defendant in that case. So I remember that so well because it was my first one.
And you won it, huh?
We did win it. We did win it.
Was it against all odds? Were the majority of people thinking that you wouldn't?
A lot of people thought we wouldn't win the case.
I could see why this one.
Some of the evidence was for my client was not good for our client. But then jump forward years later. I mean, we've represented Google for many years, and Google, of course, created the Android operating system. And there was a series of cases that Apple brought against the Android-powered, handset phone manufacturers, alleging basically that the Android system infringed intellectual property rights of Apple. And so they sued, like HTC, which was a Taiwanese phone maker.
Yes.
They sued Motorola, and they sued Samsung, which was a client of ours. And we defended these cases. I'd say it was really a proxy war. I mean, Apple didn't have the guts to sue Google. So they sued the handset manufacturers that were using the Android system. And that I really got exposure to Samsung and the Korean business world and Korean technology and Korean, the amazing way they do business there. This little country of 50 million people hanging on the end of a peninsula and has global market-leading businesses like Hyundai and Samsung and SK, Hynix, and the like, and came to enormously respect them. But this, I mean, it was we tried a series of cases, but it was a war between Apple and Samsung.
Is there a language barrier there?
It's kind of interesting. Korea is very U.S.-facing, the marketplace there. And I think it's part of the heritage of, the Korean War and all the there's a very close relationship between Korea and the U.S.
A lot of Korean Americans.
And there's a lot of Korean Americans.
Especially in California.
Yes. I mean, there's more Koreans in L.A. than any place in the world outside of Korea.
Wow.
Koreatown. You have to come visit sometime.
There you go.
It's a fun place to go in the evening.
I've been in Koreatown?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been to California. I've been to San Diego, funnily enough, from the age of 3. We had a family home in La Jolla.
Okay,
so I know
pretty nice there.
It's gorgeous. It's arguably my favorite place in the world. But Koreatown, I'll have to take you up on it. I haven't ventured there. So, like, would the lawyers of Samsung be proficient in English so that they can defend the company?
So they're the in-house lawyers. That's their job. They work for the company. They don't do litigation, so they'll retain, in this case, the U.S. lawyers. I mean, obviously, Samsung is a global company. It has issues. It'll have legal issues in countries all over the world, and they have to retain local lawyers to handle those. Mm. And so we were retained by in-house lawyers at Samsung, and we worked together very much as a team in preparing these cases and trying these cases against Apple. And there really isn't a language barrier because so many of the lawyers, they'll either be Korean Americans who, maybe they grew up in the U.S. or as children, their parents immigrated to the U.S. and then they've come back. Or they will be Korean lawyers who have gone to get an LLM, a master's degree in law in the U.S. That's a very common pattern. So usually we are working with in-house lawyers who often have a U.S. legal law degree and English and fluent English speakers.
Yeah, I can believe Samsung are going to be well prepared to have their legal team or legal floor all be proficient in English in the event.
Yeah,
Interestingly,
it's tougher in Japan. I mean, English isn't as widely spoken, or at least spoken as fluently. So my experience.
Yeah. So I'm going in 2 months, and I was told, just brace yourself that the English isn't as prominent as you might think. It's not Hong Kong.
They study it, but I think it's kind of book learning of English a lot. Mm-hmm. The younger people are different, professionals are different, but it's really not like Korea, where English is so widely spoken.
Yeah. And they've done a lot in the space of entertainment and soft power. One of my favorite shows in recent memory is Squid Games.
Really?
Yeah, it's
I couldn't watch that.
It's a bit too gory, bloody, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't know anything much about the Korean cinema and production companies. But when they had the whole world talking about it, I heard LeBron James talking about Squid Games. And then I went on to find out that it was a Korean show dubbed in English, and it's making the rounds, with some of the most famous people in the world. I said that is a perfect example of how movie making and production can be a source of soft power.
No question. And there have been some wonderful Korean movies. Parasite, of course, won Best Picture. And then,
so good that.
And then there was one, I think it was called Reasons to Leave. And then there's one that's out right now, and I'm just blanking on the name. It's about these two Korean kids, a boy and a girl, who get separated at the age of 12. And then they ended up seeing each other 12 years later, and then 12 years later again. Many of your listeners will know this movie, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be nominated for an Academy Award.
It just came out?
Yeah, just very... No, you can see it now. It might be on Netflix or...
Old Boy.
Past Lives. That's the title of it. Past Lives. And then there was one 2 years ago called Reason to Leave.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Korean soft power, entertainment, media, music, it is, as you say, it's amazing.
It's world class. Okay, Past Lives, 2003.
You got to watch it.
That's definitely on my list. My God,
it's not the best movie of the last 10 years. It's a Japanese movie. It's called Drive My Car. Drive My Car. You got to watch it, Mo. So just to tell you, this is a movie that in the Oscars, I've been affiliated with the Academy Award for many, many years. It won the award for Best Foreign Language Film, but it was nominated for Best Picture overall. So Japanese movie nominated for Best Picture overall.
it was nominated in the Oscars.
Yes, and it won Best Foreign Language, but it was one of the nominated films for Best Film overall. And it's an astonishing movie.
Definitely in my notes. Thank you so much. Keep it coming. As soon as any movies come to mind, send them my way. I'm always on the hunt for not wasting any time on a bad movie. We saw Night Swim the other day, and what a waste of money that was. Demons and water should never mix. Leave the sharks for the water. They now integrated a Night Swim with demons, and I just did not buy into that at all.
Right.
How much has the industry changed since you started? And today, with the integration of tech and media, and specifically social media, easier today? Are you having more fun now, or when you started off your career?
Well, I'm having more fun, but not necessarily because of changes in law practice in the law industry. I mean, so I started before the internet. I mean, I started when you were reviewing documents and discovery and disclosure were parties in litigation. You have to disclose information, documents to the other side. We're dealing with paper documents, and you had to have eyes on documents, and you had whole teams of people who are reviewing documents and trying to find things that are relevant or damaging. And that's all, it's now at the point, with some of the AI available now, you can do a lot of that without human eyeballs. I mean, you still need to have checks and quality control. But really, the volume of data to be dealt with is the biggest single change. Email, texts of all kinds. In the U.S. legal system, and the Brits too, but especially in the U.S., we're famous for this sort of pretrial discovery where you have all cards on the table. Like I can say, I want to, we need to inspect your phone. We want everything off your phone addressing any of the following issues. And of course, the best stuff is always in the emails, not the formal documents, the letters that go to the other side or counterparties. The best stuff is always in the emails and the texts.
Yeah, that's where stuff rises and is discovered.
That's where people are really candid. They'll text things that they think nobody's ever going to see this.
Yeah.
Is that how, like in the LIV Golf case, we got texts of some, I won't name names, but you can imagine who they are, major golfers, and golfers talking to each other about LIV Golf and the PGA Tour in the future, unfiltered comments, where before lawyers were involved, you can imagine.
Any worry that the tech could one day replace all the thousands of hours it takes to become a law graduate and eventually practice law? Will that be robotized, if that's a word?
I mean, there's some significant issues there, Mo. As lawyers, we're basically wordsmiths. We string words together. Large language models string words together, and they're getting better and better at it, the generative AI. So, it's not going to happen overnight. We've known for several years now. The adoption is going to be somewhat slow. We've known for several years now that AI programs can read diagnostic imaging, MRI scans, X-rays better than radiologists can, right? We know that.
Yes.
We're still graduating radiologists. When the internet became a thing, it was 10 years before it was widely adopted. So I think notwithstanding all that we're reading about AI and how it's going to change things, it's not going to be changed overnight. There'll be particular applications. And in the legal world, we're gradually starting to use this. It can speed some things up. Ultimately, I think law firms will change in terms of their structure. Basically, law firms are kind of pyramids now. At the top, you have senior partners, then partners, and then you have associates and the very junior associates is kind of a pyramid. And I think ultimately that's kind of the pyramid's going to kind of narrow because we'll have eventually less need for so many junior lawyers. There's a lot of things that technology can do. But we'll need different kinds of lawyers. We'll need lawyers who are adept with the technology and being able to optimize prompts and being able to get the information in the best way possible. So I think it'll change the structure of law firms. It may eliminate certain types of jobs. We'll create other kinds of jobs.
Reduce overhead, probably one of the things that is on the...
Yeah, maybe. But, look, for what I do, I think the AI is more of a threat to transactional lawyers, what we're talking about, the lawyers that write agreements, contracts, M&A transactions, and the like.
ChatGPT can solve that for you.
Yeah, well, at least the first draft at this point.
Yes.
But for advocates, I don't think anytime soon some AI is going to be making arguments to a court.
Yeah.
I don't think judges are going to be replaced by AI so that AI is making the decisions. I don't think human beings are going to be comfortable with that.
You still need a human being in that position.
You need a human being ultimately making decisions, even though human beings are flawed. There's studies that show that there was a study that showed judges in Germany in criminal cases issue longer sentences for the same offense after lunch than before lunch. They also, the Monday after their home soccer team loses, the sentences on average is longer. So, human beings aren't perfect, but none of us, I think, are going to really be comfortable turning over to an AI program decisions about people's lives and how long somebody's going to spend in jail. We need a human being there making a judgment, looking the defendant in the eye and making their best judgment.
جديد. اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
Although you do hear some crazy stories going through, like someone spilling boiling hot coffee from McDonald's and then him winning the case. Now they have caution hot coffee on your McDonald's cups.
Mo, let's talk about that famous case. I know something about that.
It's a real case, right?
It's a real case.
Okay, tell me.
McDonald's heated its coffee to a super hot level. This was a known phenomenon. I mean, you can understand. You buy a cup of coffee, you get out in the car, you want it to still be warm,
of course.
And you want it to be as warm as long as possible. So, they were doing what a lot of customers appreciated. They had a history, and I can't remember the number, but it was a substantial number of cases where people were burned by spilt coffee because of this practice. So, known risk to McDonald's. McDonald's, knowing that some number of people are going to be badly burned by this practice of selling superheated coffee, continued to do it. They did that. Some woman bought this coffee. I think it was an older woman, bought the coffee. She went out in the car, started to drive. She put the coffee cup between her legs so she could have both hands on the steering wheel. The coffee spilled and burnt her badly. The jury gave a very large award. It was a ridiculous award. I can't remember what it was. I mean, there was compensatory damages and then punitive damages. It might have been in the tens of millions of dollars. But the plaintiff's lawyers, the lawyers who represented that woman, were able to present to the jury the record of this history of McDonald's knowing that its superheated coffee was burning people. The jury thought McDonald's should be punished for that. Now, so there was a big jury award. That made the news. I mean, you know about it. This is probably 15, 20 years ago. What people don't know is that award was set aside. It was too much money. The judge has the ability to do that. The judge can say, well, this jury just didn't get it right. That was too much. Judge can reduce the award. A court of appeals can reduce the award. I actually think that was a defensible result. I mean, what do you think? I mean, if there's a company that's selling something that's known to be potentially dangerous and people are getting hurt by it, Should they be held to account for
They
that?
should have adjusted the temperature of their
There you go.
or
And
reached that.
they did that.
So,
After that case, they did that.
yeah. Now that I hear the backstory, it kind of makes sense. Someone who has been in the news recently, feels like maybe for the past 2 years or so from a legal perspective, is Donald Trump.
Only more than 2 years, I think.
More than 2 years. When they raided his house in Key Largo, was
Yeah. Well, I'm just being facetious.
Oh,
Trump's been in the news for a long time.
probably, yeah.
When you were talking about the legal,
The legal element of it. How does someone go from president to having his home raided?
well, I don't remember the details about how the government realized he had classified documents in his home.
That's what it was.
Down in Florida. That was the issue. And, you're not supposed to have classified documents, especially after you're president, in your home. So Mo, he's actually facing 4 criminal cases. He's facing one in New York. He's facing one in Washington, D.C. He's facing one in Georgia. He's facing one in Florida with different allegations in each case. And I don't think he's going to run the table. He is going to be convicted in one of these cases. The probability that he could win every single one of those, I think, is very, very low. They're different cases, and I think he has a good chance. In the New York case, is kind of a silly case. The theory of that case is he paid off Stormy Daniels. He paid her off to enhance her to preserve his candidacy for president.
And who is she in this?
Stormy Daniels is this woman who he paid off to keep silent about the fact that they had sex. That's her name. I don't think it's her real name.
Yeah, it's a
numbed something. So he paid her off not to talk about that. He's been charged criminally
which is a felony. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a felony. He's been charged with a campaign finance violation for doing that. Not because he used campaign money to pay her off, but get this. He paid her off in order to preserve his candidacy, because if people had knew about this episode with Stormy Daniels, they wouldn't vote for him. And because it was to preserve his candidacy, it should have been reported to as a campaign expenditure. That's the theory of the case. I think it's kind of a silly theory, and I think he's likely to win that case, but that's the theory of that case. The Washington, D.C. case is basically that he conspired to interfere with official proceedings relating to the election. I think that's a very, very dangerous case for him. Not so much because of the allegations, but it's in Washington, D.C., which is 95% Democratic, and a judge who seems to be hostile to his case. They wanted to set that trial months into the future. She set the case for trial in March this year, the month after next. I think it's set for trial on March 4. There's a appeal pending now about whether he has immunity and can't be prosecuted, but it sounds like that appeal isn't going well for him. I think that's a dangerous case for him. Maybe a 70% chance he loses that case. The Florida case, classified documents in the home, he can probably win because it's a criminal case, and for a criminal charge, the prosecutor must prove what's called the Latin term mens rea, that it was done intentionally with criminal intent. And so a defense to that is good faith. I, Donald Trump, had a good faith basis to think I could have these classified documents in my home. I may have been wrong, but I have a good faith basis, and that would be a defense to the criminal charges. There is a case his lawyers are relying on called the Clinton sock drawer case. It's a case involving some I can't remember, it's tapes or whatever it was, something that Clinton got while he was president.
That's a terminology today. That's like
it's the shorthand name for the case.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, they got the Clinton sock drawer.
Yeah.
There was a sock drawer, and whatever this was, I can't remember what it was. He had got, and whatever you get as president is supposed to be property of the government. Mm-hmm. You can't, it's not supposed to be your personal property. And in that case, there's a question about whether whatever this object was, or objects, I can't remember what it was, whether he had converted it to his own personal property by taking it home and putting it in the sock drawer. And the judge, in the opinion, gave some credence to the idea that, well, maybe he had a good faith basis. So Trump's lawyers are now citing that precedent and saying, well, he had a good faith basis. The problem with the Florida case is the cover-up. He ordered the destruction of some videos. That's a crime in itself. That's called obstruction of justice. It's the situation always. The cover-up is worse than the crime. So, but for that cover-up, he could probably win the Florida case. It may be tricky for him. The Georgia case is going to be a circus. There are 17 defendants. This is the one where go out and find me some more votes. Find me some more electors. The allegation is he tried to interfere with the election process. And 3 or 4 of the defendants have pled guilty and are presumably cooperating with the prosecutor. They may testify against him. So, New York case, probably, I'm going to say 80% chance he wins that.
Washington, no.
70% plus he loses. Georgia, 70%, 60% plus he loses. Florida, maybe 60% he wins, 70%. But if you run the odds, you don't have to go to Las Vegas to run the probabilities. Can he really run the table and win all 4? I think the odds are against it. So he's probably going to be a convicted felon.
Does blue and red states come into play here?
Not really. But what does come into play is the composition of the local population, who they are, and because those are the people from whom the jury is drawn. So your jury in Washington, D.C. is going to be very different than your jury in Florida. And as I said, the Washington, D.C. jury, 95% Democratic. He's not popular.
Florida is his people, Republican-ish.
It should be, yeah. Kind of a mixed state. I don't know the actual composition of in the particular county or where the jurors are drawn from. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
If you're handicapping these things, those are the sort of factors that you look at. One thing that's kind of interesting to talk about is there's been a ruling in Colorado that he cannot be on the ballot.
Wow.
You've read about this?
No.
Okay. Stay with me now, Mo.
I'm with you.
Stay with me. We had a civil war in the United States, as you know, back in the 1860s. And we had all these southern states that seceded from the Union. And ultimately the war was over, the Union was preserved. In the wake of that, there was an amendment to the United States Constitution, the 14th Amendment. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, anyone who had taken an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and then later engaged in an insurrection against the United States is not eligible for federal office. You with me?
I am.
All right. So there was a case brought in Colorado challenging whether Trump could be the Republican nominee and be on the ballot in Colorado. And in the trial court, it was a trial not to a jury, but to a trial. Sometimes certain types of things you tried only to a judge, not to the jury. The judge found there was an insurrection, April 6th. She says that met the definition of an insurrection. She said that Trump did engage in the insurrection, but she said the office of the president is not one of those federal offices for which you would be disqualified if you engage in an insurrection against the government.
And just for those who don't know, what on earth an insurrection is, a violent uprising against the authority or government, so basically like a coup.
Well, an attempted coup, revolution.
Yeah.
She found that this insurrection, what happened on, January 6th, that was to me, that's debatable. To me, what happened there was some hoodlums got in the Capitol. To my mind, that doesn't meet the definition, just personal opinion, of an insurrection. But this judge found there was an insurrection, and Trump engaged in the insurrection. Again, to my mind, that's debatable, because what did he do? Basically, what he's accused mostly of doing is doing nothing. He didn't tweet, Proud Boys, stop it,
But they were his people.
They were his people.
Right.
But, if he's sitting there in the White House in the Oval Office with his hands folded, is he engaging in an insurrection? I don't know. I'm just saying I think it's...
Not to the naked eye.
I think it's debatable.
Yeah.
So, but she oddly found that the presidency is not one of the federal offices from which you'd be disqualified if you engage in an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
That was appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court. Every state has their own Supreme Court. The Colorado Supreme Court reversed and said, no, the presidency is covered. If he engaged in an insurrection, he's disqualified from the ballot. So that's where matters now stand. It's appealed to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will definitely take that case, and they'll decide it on an accelerated basis. There have been similar challenges in other states. The state of Maine, whoever runs elections there, it's a different procedure than in Colorado, has ruled he engaged in an insurrection and he's not eligible to be on the ballot. There was a similar challenge in Michigan. Trump won there. California, interestingly, has decided we're not going to contest this. He can be on the ballot. But this is a live issue right now, and it'll be decided by the United States Supreme Court whether he is disqualified because of this amendment to the Constitution that was adopted after the American Civil War.
There's a few things on his plate this year, it looks like.
He's got a lot of things. And then not to mention this New York State Court proceeding where he's alleged to have kept basically inaccurate records and inflated the value of his properties. You know, he testified in that. His daughter Ivanka testified in that. And, you know, just reading what from the newspapers, the accounts I've read, that hasn't gone very well for him. That's a civil action, not a criminal action. The outcome of that could be, a fine or, the government, New York State government has asked for over $300 million, as I understand it.
My goodness.
So he does have a lot going on.
Wow. And he's still wanting to run for president in a year?
Seemingly so. I mean, he is running. There's no question about that.
He's running. Okay.
I mean, I think, I'm not a huge Trump fan personally. I think he has the potential to be, in his first term, he said a lot of crazy things. He didn't do many crazy things. He was more of a talker. I'm really concerned that if he gets elected again, right now he's got such a chip on his shoulder. He feels like he's been hard done by the world. I'm just afraid the gloves will be off, and I'm a little concerned about what he might do if he's elected again.
Something that's in the news like crazy is the Epstein case that is blowing up. Is that something that was discovered on email and text? How did it become something that just, blew up in front of our eyes?
Well, I mean, the history is, he was prosecuted in Florida, and he pled guilty. I mean, there was a negotiated plea. And then I really think it was women victims, bringing it to his ongoing, continuing behavior to the attention of authorities and lawyers who were bringing claims on their behalf. I mean, it's not something I've followed in detail, but I think that's the background to it.
And from what I can see is that there are probably so many people in the middle who have covered up information that to protect their people, and now you just hear of these mainstream names being affiliated with this case and talk about a PR nightmare for some of the names who I do not want to mention, but it really has caught in the eyes of many people.
You don't want to have your name mentioned in the same sentence with Jeffrey Epstein.
No.
And so I think I know there's a lot of people who there's some kind of guilt by association out there, which is unfounded and very unfortunate. And in addition to, I'm sure, a lot of guilty people.
Switching gears, you have done some work for or with Elon Musk. He has, my goodness, it's almost like whenever he takes over a project, he doesn't know how to fail. What's it like representing him in some capacity?
He's a fascinating individual. He's very much an independent thinker. He's very much believes in his own counsel, in his own instincts. He's a big believer in it, and they're generally very, very good. But he can, he's somebody who will listen. And, we've had cases where we've represented him in trials, and he's taken the stand and testified and done very, very well.
What was it that he was on trial for?
Well, there had been a couple of cases that we've tried for him. I mean, one was, do you remember there were some boys lost in a cave in Thailand for a while? Do you remember that a few years ago?
Yes.
Yeah. So Elon, who at the time had 4 sons, was very touched by this predicament of these boys in this cave. And so he pulled some SpaceX engineers off their jobs and had them design, working overtime, come up with like a little submarine. You could put a child in it with air and whatever, and, pull them out of the cave. And he wanted to help. And he sent this over to Thailand. And there was a British cave diver who gave an interview to the press and said that, this is a publicity stunt, and Elon should take the submarine and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. Elon, in response, tweeted that, "I assure you this guy's a pedo guy," and similar kinds of remarks about this British cave diver.
Yeah.
So the cave diver, the Brit, sued him in Los Angeles for defamation. And he testified in that case. And he took the stand. He was called by the other side, by the plaintiff, as the first witness in the case. You can do that. You can call your adversary and put him right on the stand and start to cross-examine him. They called Elon, and the first question, this is a defamation case, right? So question is, do people believe how much damage has been done by this comment? Who's the speaker? These are key issues. And the first question to Elon was, "You're Elon Musk. The world cares what you say." We didn't know what he was going to say. There was pause, and he said, "Well, I don't really know. I know. I've been talking about fossil fuels for a long time now, and the need to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels and to have electric automobiles, and the change doesn't seem to be happening fast enough. It doesn't seem like people are listening. So no, I'm not sure at all that people care what I have to say." It's just brilliant. And then the other case, this is interesting because it has a Saudi angle. You may recall he tweeted, "I'm interested in taking Tesla private at $420 a share, funding secured." Funding secured.
Remember that?
Yeah. And supposedly it came out that the funding he supposedly was from the PIF. And there were texts between Elon and His Excellency Yasser al-Rumayyan. And it was clear from the text that he didn't have funding. And so there was a securities fraud case, class action brought against Elon for making a false statement that affected the market. They claimed that investors lost money because of this false statement. And at the beginning of the trial, there was discovery, parties exchange evidence, that's our system. The judge instructed the jury right at the beginning, "I instruct you that Mr. Musk's tweet was false. He did not have funding, and he knew he did not have funding. Now proceed, call your first witness." The judge can do that. If the evidence is undisputed on a subject, there's no question for the jury, and the judge can take an issue away from the jury, tell them, "I've already decided this part of the case. You don't have to decide." The judge, the undisputed evidence, looking at the text, there was no funding. We tried the case. We won the case. And we should have won the case because it's a fraud claim, and the elements of fraud are not only that there's a false statement, but it must be a material false statement. It can't be about something that's of no consequence. And our argument to the jury was that if the wealthiest man in the world and Tesla's largest shareholder says that he wants to take Tesla private, the marketplace doesn't care whether or not funding is secured. The market will react to such a statement by the richest guy in the world. It was literally immaterial whether he had funding. The jury got it. They were only out 2 hours, and they returned a defense verdict.
And he lost that.
Oh, he won that. He won that. It was a defense verdict.
Oh, so he didn't get into trouble for that tweet?
No. They sued him for fraud. And yes, the judge said it was a false statement, but it wasn't material. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, the market would have reacted whether funding was secured
or not. Yes.
So he won.
That makes sense, actually.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't matter.
What's your take on how PIF have entered the sporting world and quite aggressively?
And there was a lawsuit. We had the privilege of representing LIV Golf versus the PGA Tour in an antitrust unfair competition case. So I have some insight as a result of that case into LIV Golf. I'm really not knowledgeable to speak about other PIF sports investments. I barely know what Newcastle is, for example. I'm not a follower of the Premier League or soccer generally. But look, I think that LIV Golf came up with an entirely different kind of product, which was more fun, more exciting, and kind of shook up the world of golf. And it needed shaking up. I mean, you look at the demographics. The PGA Tour and its audience really skews, white and older, whereas LIV Golf, the audience was younger, more diverse, and that was part of, I think, the strategy, deliberate strategy, and more fun. So instead of these long 4-day events, you had a 54-hole, 3-day shotgun start. It's faster. There's rock music.
Yeah, I was going to say music.
It's a festive event. It's a great. I mean, the PGA Tour. It turns out, you know what, Mo? Competition turns out it's a good thing.
It is. Competition is healthy.
Yeah, so it changes things.
Yeah.
And it kind of shook and woke up the PGA Tour. And I think a lot of the players see the benefits of it. And you're exactly right. If somebody comes along and is prepared to pay more, a larger share of what's at stake in the sport, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. It's good for the players. It's good for the audience. So, I think it was that one investment was a very exciting investment and really has changed the world of golf.
It's funny how sometimes you don't know that you needed something until the next thing came along and made it better.
Yes, exactly.
And there
you
is
take it for granted. So in this case, you had a monopolist. So the case was we say antitrust in American law.
Yeah.
The rest of the world says competition. But basically what you have is a monopolist, the PGA Tour, no dispute. They monopolize the market in the U.S. for elite golf. And a lot of monopolists, they're lazy. Innovation is not going to come from monopolists. They're interested in everything's good, right? Things are going along fine. Why should they change? No need to change. And then you had a new entrant come in, and suddenly that's a threat. That's a threat to the monopoly. And the problem there is it's okay to be a monopolist. It's not illegal to be a monopolist. Good on you if you're a monopolist. But if you're a monopolist, you can't preserve your monopoly against a new entrant, a new competitor, by taking anti-competitive actions. Like, for example, blackballing players who come to play for the new entrant and saying, you're penalized now. You can't come back and you can't play on any PGA Tour. And there were other things that in the case were alleged to be anti-competitive. But yeah, the PGA Tour was fat and happy and saw no need to change. And now they have to change.
And they eventually folded in agreeing to merge with...
There was we weren't involved in the negotiation of that deal, but there was a memorandum of understanding that was signed up between the Tour and LIV Golf where they would explore some type of combination. And I don't think that has been finalized. I think the MOU contemplated that there was a date by which this was supposed to happen, and maybe the end of this last year. I'm not positive. And I think I read that has been extended. So presumably discussions are still ongoing about what that will look like.
Was it Jay Moynihan who had some comments to say about Saudi and PIF and LIV?
Oh, yeah. And Moynihan was like, he was,
called us names.
There is no place in American golf for Saudi money.
That's what it was. Thank you.
And then no one has ever had to apologize for playing for the PGA Tour. These kind of sanctimonious comments. And then suddenly our money was good enough, I guess.
Yeah, all of a sudden, he was the most contradictory person of the year. When you're to name us names only to agree with us. I have more questions for you than you might have answers for. When you operate domestically in the US and then you have to take your services abroad, is it like, when you practice law, you do it one place and it's the same everywhere, or do you have to adjust? I know you came to Saudi, you opened a practice over here where you have, there's a team of about 30 people today?
We have 10 lawyers.
10 lawyers.
We have 10 lawyers in Riyadh, all Saudi lawyers. No, every country has its own legal system.
Yeah.
And they have their own bar, their own legal profession. They have their own credentials, the credential that you have to be qualified to practice as a lawyer. I can't go to Saudi Arabia and practice as a Saudi lawyer. I can't do that in France or Japan. I'm qualified to practice. I'm a member of the bar, and actually in the U.S. it's by state. So I'm a member of the bar in New York and the bar in California. I can go practice and do cases in other states. I have to get permission by the court, if I want to show up in Colorado or wherever. That's routinely granted. But outside the U.S., there's different legal educations entirely. At our firm, we have 34 offices around the world, I think in 12 countries. And we pretty much everywhere have locally qualified lawyers. So in Riyadh, we have Saudi lawyers. In France, we have French lawyers. In London, we have UK qualified lawyers.
Which is the way to do it.
And it's really kind of the only way to do it.
The only way to do it.
Now, there are some types of proceedings that there are so-called international arbitrations where parties are parties have agreed to resolve their dispute not within a state's legal system, but pursuant to some arbitration system like the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, or the London Court of International Arbitration. There's a number of these tribunals around the world. And there you don't necessarily have to be a member of the bar where that is located. You have to have a certain credential to be admitted as an arbitrator, and that tends to be a truly arbitration practice or an international practice. So when we're doing an international arbitration, our team may consist of lawyers from different countries with different backgrounds and qualifications.
So what made you decide, let me take my talents or services to Saudi Arabia?
I first came to Saudi probably, I'm going to say 6-7 years ago. And I had a client who had done business here who was telling me he thought it was a land of opportunity. And also the thing, I remember him telling me that Saudis are the nicest people on earth, the nicest people he's ever met. And so I came.
I hope you found that to be true.
Absolutely true.
Great.
No, absolutely true. Gracious, you're famous for your hospitality, and it's part of the culture, and I've enjoyed all the friends that I've made here in the association. But as I came and met people and saw what was going on here and witnessed the ambition and the energy and the projects, I really thought this is an opportunity for us and something that we want to be a part of. And usually when we go to a new country, a new jurisdiction, we're the first lawyers who are coming and saying, hey, we're here to do dispute work. There's a number of law firms here, and when we first opened in London, there was probably 150 American law firms that had offices in London. But they're all to do transactional work, capital markets work, M&A, fundraising, doing deals. There'll be a lot of those. There's a lot of those in Riyadh right now, foreign firms that, want in on what's going on here. But we offer something different. And I thought there was, again, maybe an unmet need for people who are specialists at dispute resolution, not only domestically, but cross-border and international. So not only matters like the LIV Golf case or other types of cases that will involve multiple jurisdictions, but domestic work as well. So our Saudi lawyers appear in Saudi courts and are doing cases here that just involve Saudi parties and Saudi law.
And as Saudi opens up, taking on these projects, taking on these ventures, taking on these investments, the need for lawyers and practices are going to be more than maybe ever.
Unfortunately, part and parcel of having this ambition and embarking on these huge projects means that there are going to be things that go sideways. Not every investment turns up roses. Some things won't work out. Sometimes it's somebody else's fault. Sometimes people say it's your fault. Sometimes you then have a target on your back, and you need, there's need for people like us who do what we do. So I think that's true. I think that comes with the territory. If you're successful and you're ambitious and you're allocating a lot of money in a short period of time, there are going to be some things where, there'll be disagreements, there'll be disputes.
I was, a month ago, I was in London 2 months ago, actually, at the World Tourism Market. And I didn't realize how big NEOM was until I met some of the people involved there. From so many different verticals just under the NEOM umbrella. That is something that is, when complete, going to be, I think, the new face of the country. The line intrigues me. It's as sci-fi as it gets. I feel like I've seen it before, but I haven't. But I've seen it in movies. Have you kept a close eye on what's happening?
Yeah, very much. All the Giga projects, generally, I mean, we've met the leaders of all of them. I've met them. And look, among other things, one of the practice areas that we have is construction disputes, litigation.
Yeah.
You can't have major projects without having disputes between the owner and the contractor. It's just inevitable. There'll be disagreements. This wasn't within the contract. This is an additional expense. You didn't do this right. This isn't what the plans called for. There'll be disagreements and disputes. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of work for lawyers who practice in that area. And I mean, that's partly why, if I could be permitted to put in a plug, next week at the Four Seasons in Riyadh, we are doing a seminar on construction disputes. We're having lawyers come in from our office in London, in addition to lawyers from Riyadh, and we've got about 80 attendees signed up for it. We're really excited about that. And we'll be talking about how to avoid disputes, best practices for dealing during the course of a project between the owner and the various contractors to try to avoid disputes, but recognize at the end of the day, for major projects like this, there are going to be disputes. How do you resolve them? How do you position yourself in advance to get the best possible result?
Besides winning cases, John, what makes you happy in life?
I have 5 daughters.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. I'm a lucky man. They're married. They have children. 3 of them live in L.A. One lives in Boston. One lives in London. And that's really my, my legacy someday, the children and the grandchildren. So they make me really happy. I very much enjoy reading and learning.
I would have told you that.
I enjoy learning. I enjoy the arts. I enjoy film. We've talked a little bit about film. I collect some contemporary art. I enjoy that a lot, but I enjoy history and biography. I just enjoy learning generally. And I'm also kind of a workout fanatic. I used to do a lot of triathlons. I've done the Hawaiian Ironman a couple of times. I haven't been in a starting line in a number of years, but I still swim, bike, run, and lift weights and I've reached an age where I've seen the benefits of stretching and doing yoga. So I spend an hour or 2 working out every day, and I really much enjoy that. But I love my law practice. I love every aspect of it. I love litigating. I love the business of law. I love dealing with legal problems. I love meeting new people and learning about their businesses. So, I mean, my life I'm very fortunate. It's a very rich life.
I think if you go into a courtroom after a triathlon, good luck to the person you're going against. Because
well, I actually do think, among other things, a trial, a multi-day trial, it can be multi-week and multi-month, is an endurance contest. So being fit really, really matters.
Mentally and physically. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm sure you see the effects on how the body and mind works after, keeping fit mentally, and how that transcends to your practice. Any mentors growing up?
Not really.
No?
Not really.
What pulled you into the space?
So especially on my mother's side, there were a number of lawyers. And then siblings. I had 2 siblings who were lawyers and a brother-in-law who was a lawyer. So, I was kind of surrounded. I knew of law, kind of surrounded by lawyers. So kind of had in the back of my head, well, maybe that's something I can do.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on the radar from an early age. And look, you may have gotten the sense I'm kind of a verbal person. If the world is divided into quants and verbal people, I'm much more in the latter than the former.
Yeah. How much longer do you see yourself practicing this? It still seems to be a passion of yours.
Yeah, no, I don't see an end date. We all have end dates, of course, but I see myself doing this as long as I possibly can. I have an uncle who was a lawyer in California and was practicing until he passed away at the age of 105.
He was practicing till then?
Yeah.
Going to courts?
I don't know if he's going to courts. I mean, there were some reports that he would go into the office and just sleep on the couch. So I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he was going into the office. And,
with these people, if they stopped earlier, they probably wouldn't survive. You hear stories of that, those who retire. So
yeah.
My dad was an airline executive for 30 years for Saudi Airlines. He retired at 60, passed away at 63.
Mm.
Okay, it didn't help that he was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, but work kept him going.
Yeah, no, look, I get a physical every year, and I asked a longtime nurse who had been doing these physicals for 20, 30 years for my internist. I said, you've seen thousands of patients, that have retired, or they get older. What sort of discriminators have you seen that kind of seems to make the difference, or markers for who does well as they get older and not so well? And she, without hesitation, said retirement.
Wow.
In general, her experience, that's not good for people.
You got to keep moving. What is it? Weak things break. You got to keep moving.
Yeah, find something else. I mean, if you're not going to do the day job you've had for 30 or 40 years, find something else.
Yeah, it'll keep you busy. 2 last questions before I let you go. I know you have something coming up at 5. Worst advice you've ever gotten, and then we'll talk about the best advice that you've ever gotten that you can pass on to us. What's the worst advice you've ever gotten? So broad, huh?
Worst advice. Nothing's really coming to me, to be honest, Mo.
No, I appreciate the honesty. How about something that you would like to pass on, words of advice that has perhaps helped you become the person you are today, the professional, the human being? What's something that you can share with us that we can incorporate in our lives to live or strive to become successful?
I would say don't stop learning. Never stop learning.
Lifelong learner, huh?
Yeah. There's always opportunities to learn, and that what makes your experiences rich. I mean, I love the fact that I've come to Saudi Arabia knowing nothing about Saudi and Saudi culture or its history or its art or its food or its economy or, all the things that we've been talking about. And I've been able to learn a lot, but you multiply that by, I've had a similar experience in many other countries around the world. So to me, that's priceless.
Well, thank you for many things, for sparing some time to me, and for the podcast, for coming to our country, investing in our country, opening up a business over here, employing 12 Saudis, and I'm sure that number is going to grow. It's typically those who don't visit Saudi who have a negative opinion of it, and then when they come, they see it for what it is, the way you do, and the way you come a couple times a year. So
I come more than a couple of times.
More than a couple? Did I downplay it? But honestly, thank you for believing in us. And I'm honored to have had this chat with you.
No, I appreciate you having me on your show. I mean, I know how successful and respected it is, so it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be on your show and speak with you.
It means a great deal coming from you. Thanks a lot, John. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.